In today's lesson, I'm going to show you an approach to playing that I've used going back to the very beginning. What we're going to do is play a basic blues solo in 3 different spots on the neck. The same solo, but in 3 different positions. Now, this approach is connected to triads because we have 3 positions we can play our basic triads up and down the fretboard. Now, once we cover these 3 solos individually, I'll show you how to connect them together so you can play freely across the entire neck. So today we're going to play a 12-bar blues shuffle in the key of E. And I'm going to start by playing a basic solo down in the open position. Then we'll move these same ideas up to 2 other spots on the fretboard. These 3 positions are connected to the triad shapes in the key of E. Here's the first solo demonstration. So before we get into this first solo, all the tabs, notation, and backing tracks for this lesson are available over on my Patreon site. Now this first solo stays basically down in this open position. And I'm playing a lot of typical blues phrases. These aren't the types of things that connect necessarily to one scale, but they're more like musical ideas you pick up from listening to a lot of blues albums. If you're interested in this sort of thing, I recommend listening to early Freddie King, Otis Ruch, or guys like Hubert Sumlin. Now let's get into this solo. Basically, I'm starting out by playing this lick on the top 2 strings, and the notes are B, open B, to C sharp, to E, and then to G. Or you could look at this as the 5th, 6th, root, and minor 3rd in the key of E. Then I'm going down to the open E, back up to the G, back down to C sharp, and then open E string, and then sliding up to the note E on the 5th fret of the B string. So then I'm coming down on the G string and going, that's A, open G, A, and then hammering on to G sharp, which is the 3rd of our E chord. And you can kind of hit that C sharp along with that A, kind of like a double stop. Right, so I repeat that phrase twice over the 1 chord, that first 4 bars of our 12-bar blues. Then from here, we're playing over the 4 chord, and I just stick in the same spot. Kind of playing around in the minor pentatonic. So, right, hitting that note A, which is the root of that chord, G, which is the flat 7 of an A7 chord, and then E down to D and back to E. And then I play, right, sliding up here to the note B, which is, the 5th of an E major chord, and then the root. Kind of a lot of the similar kind of things with these double stops. And then I hit a lot of these upstrokes on the top 2 strings. So that's B, the B string, and the E string. And then coming down, pulling off from D down to the open B, and then A, and then hammering from G to G sharp. Right, then as we go to the 5 chord, Right, I'm kind of playing around this open B string because that's the root of the chord. Right, so that's B up to D and kind of bending that a little bit. And then open E up to F sharp, pulling off from F to E. Back to D to open B. And then again, going to the 4 chord, kind of seeing this chord and going up to the 3rd, which is the note C sharp. And then, right? This kind of thing. Right? Very classic open E blues licks, right? And then sliding up, right? This really typical classic kind of blues thing, right? That's B, D, and an open E string with a 5th, the flat 7, and the root of an E7 chord. Then walking chromatic up to the root of our 5 chord on the turnaround. So. Right, so that's the basic solo we're going to be working with through this lesson, right? Some simple ideas, really bluesy, a lot of motifs, a lot of repeating notes and combinations of notes. Now, the real trick to this is taking this out of this position and moving it up and around the fretboard. Because when I was starting out playing, I would learn things like that. I would learn things from listening to guys like Freddie King or Albert Collins, or Albert King, any of these guys. And I would pick up little things they were doing that were, particular to one position. They worked in one spot. Maybe I just knew how to do them in one key, on one set of strings, in one position. And it was cool, but I was very limited. I was very limited to just playing that one lick in that one space on the neck. And it always kind of sounded the same. The real trick to opening up the fretboard is taking these simple ideas and finding them in other spots and learning how to move them around the fretboard. So what we're going to do now is take the same solo, but we're going to move it up a position. And these positions stem from our basic triad shapes. So what we're looking at here on the fretboard are these underlying triad groupings. And we could break it down to 3-string groupings. If we take an E major chord, the notes are E, G sharp, and B, right? The root, major, 3rd, and 5th. And in this lower position, we can play different inversions of that triad in this spot. We've got, right, there's 3rd, 5th, root. We can play 5th, root, 3rd. We can play root, 3rd, 5th, and we can play 3rd, 5th, root. So we've got these different ways to play an E major triad in this one spot. Now, if we move that up the fretboard, like if we just do it on the high E string, there's our root. The next note of our triad is our 3rd, followed by the 5th. So we can take this and move it up to the different inversions, and then it repeats as we get to the 12th fret. It gets a little tight up there towards the top. But basically, that's the idea. We've got 3 positions we can play these triads. So E major, E major, E major. And we can move that through the string sets. E major, E major, E major. Right, so these are our 3 positions we're working with. So in terms of blues, right, right? We can play that here based around these triads, and then we can move that same thing up here. And then we can move the same thing up here. So now I'm going to play our original solo again, the one I played along to the backing track in this open position, but I'm going to move it up here in this position around the 5th fret in this set of triad groupings. So you can hear how the sound of this solo dramatically changes as we move it up the fretboard. The physical nature of playing this in a different position causes our hands to operate in a different way, and it just gives the whole thing a different sound. We don't have open strings we're working with. Some of the pull-offs and hammer-ons just sound differently. Even some of the things we're picking with our right hand, if we're not playing it on the thinner high E string, but playing it down on the B string, just has a different tone and a different sound. But we get a lot of the same note combinations, but, a very different feel under the fingers. So. Right, that feels dramatically different than. And it sounds a lot different. It's a lot sweeter and less aggressive. Right, and there's a lot of different variations you can do on these basic phrases, and each position is going to kind of lend itself to different variations and different modifications. You may find yourself falling into some different note combinations and different inflections in a particular position than you would maybe down in the open position. So let's move this up to our 3rd position, right? We started in the open position, which stems from these open triad groupings, and then we moved it up here around the 5th fret, which stems from these triad groupings, and now we have one more set, right, which kind of stems around the 9th fret here, this E. Right, we can play these same basic phrases. And again, now we're moving into even thicker strings. I actually, on this performance, am going to switch over to the bridge pickup because it tends to get a little bit muddy when you're playing on the lower strings. So to compensate for that, I'm going to use a brighter sound out of the guitar. Right, so again, we've got an even more different sound and different fingering and different feel. Again, I'm kind of purposefully trying to play these solos as close to one another as I can in terms of note choice and phrasing. But what you'll find by moving these things around is that each position kind of naturally lends itself to some different things. I'm playing. Right, but if I was playing freely in that position, I may go for some different things, maybe going up higher. Right, because I've got more notes at my disposal because I'm playing this phrase way down here on the D and G strings, but now I've got the B and the high E string wide open to do more things. So it just opens up the fretboard. You can play these same basic simple ideas, but moving them around just opens things up. Now you've got a way to navigate a different part of the fretboard. And this is exactly the kind of thing I used to practice all the time when I was a kid that really helped me open things up across the neck. So now that we've kind of gone through these 3 solos, and again, I encourage you to go over to the Patreon site and download the tabs and the backing track and the notation and everything to kind of work through this at your own pace. Personally, this is the kind of stuff I would just watch the video a few times and work out by ear and watching the video. But if it helps you to use tabs and notation, that's available there too. But kind of go through this on your own pace. Once you get comfortable with it, you can start combining these things together. And of course, you can jump between positions within a solo, you know. Right, I do that kind of stuff all the time, moving around the fretboard within a certain number of measures and connecting phrases. But you can also just play in one position for one chorus through a solo, then move up and play another chorus in another position, and then finally move up. And that's kind of what I do in this final solo. I'm going to play 3 times through the form, and I'm going to build the solo by starting low and ending high. And I'm going to play some of the basic themes we played in these original solos, but I'm going to add a lot of variation to it and just some natural things that I would play that kind of come naturally in these different positions. Again, all the tabs and notation for this solo and all the other ones are going to be over on the Patreon site, so check that out. So hopefully these solo examples give you some new food for thought, some ways to think about moving simple phrases around the fretboard, and using triads as a blueprint and a guide for mapping out things on the fretboard. So until next time, happy practicing and take care.